Hey, welcome back to another video and welcome back to a new spooky cooking video. Today we're going to be doing some baking. I have done one other cooking video on my channel where I was following one of my spooky Halloween cookbooks. So if you want to see that video, make sure you go and check it out. I'll leave a link up on the screen and also in the description box below. But today I'm going to be using my Nightmare Before Christmas cookbook and we're going to be making the Sally Patchwork Layer Cake. This is what it looks like. It looks very intricate. The difficulty level is hard, but I'm a perfectionist and I have faith that I can do this. So we're going to see by the end of the video how well that goes. But yeah, this is what we're making. This is also what the inside looks like. It's going to be like a marbled layered cake. So I'm super excited and let's get started. Okay, so first up I had to grease the bottom of the pans and also the sides. I ended up using two of these spring-loaded cake pans. I got one of them from Kmart and then we already had one in our drawers. And then I also borrowed a silicone one. And then you had to put the baking paper on the bottom. I didn't really know how to do this. I know there's a method where you can like trace around the bottom, but I just couldn't be bothered, to be honest. So I kind of worked out my own way. I took the main part of the tin off and then kind of sandwiched the baking paper in between the bottom part and the thing. It's hard to explain, but you can see what I mean. And then I just cut the excess off. So then to do the silicone cake tin, obviously I couldn't do my method that I was doing, so I just kind of like roughly cut the excess off. I put the tin on top of the baking sheet and then I realistically should have traced around it, but like I said, I couldn't be bothered going to get a pen and all that, so I just roughly cut around it and it worked out pretty well anyway. So then I had to grease on top of the baking paper. Honestly, this is kind of hard. I wish I had have left my butter out to get room temperature. I had just gotten out of the fridge and it was just sticking to the baking paper. It was so hard to grease it. So then I had to sprinkle a bit of flour onto the baking paper and also the sides. This just helped the cake not stick to any of the edges or anything, and it came out really smoothly. The flour I'm using is a cake, like pastry flour. It's a little bit different to normal flour, and if you're in Australia like me and you're looking for this, I could only find it at Coles, so make sure you check there. But it's just like a really fine flour, and I just roughly sprinkled it around. I didn't do it too perfectly because I kind of assumed it wouldn't stick with all the butter and everything that I added. So now I'm adding the flour into the sieve. Watching this, I had to watch this back while I was filming because I realized that I didn't use enough flour. I thought this was a 1 cup measurement, but it turns out it was half a cup. So yeah, luckily I was filming this, otherwise I wouldn't have known what I did. My memory is so awful. So I'm very thankful that I had the footage to look back on. So I did end up adding the rest of the flour later on. Luckily I wasn't too far into the recipe and that I could just add it in. Also, I wouldn't recommend going to the gym or anything before you do this recipe because, oh my god, sifting this literally took like half an hour. My arms were aching. It's now like a few days later and my arms honestly still hurt from sifting this flour and everything. There's so much dry ingredients that go into this that you have to sieve, and oh my god, it was just a lot. So now I'm adding in the baking powder and again sifting that through. Now I'm adding some salt. I didn't really know how much to do, so I just kind of guessed. And you'll see my cat pops up to join me in a second. She loves watching me do anything in the kitchen. There she is. So now I'm measuring out the butter for the cake recipe. It used quite a lot of butter. The recipe is in like cups or something, I think, but in Australia we just use grams for the butter. I don't think our butter sticks are the same measurement as American ones, so I just googled butter into gram conversion, and that's how I worked out how much I needed. Again, this is so much easier when the butter is room temperature, so I recommend leaving it out of the fridge for quite a long time. And also when you put it in the mixing bowl, make sure you cut it up into smaller chunks, because I tried to mix it, you'll see in a minute, as it was, and it just wasn't working out. So cut it into small chunks, which the recipe does actually say to do, but I completely missed that. So in with the butter, I'm also adding in some sugar. So now I'm using my electric whisk. As you can see, it just wasn't working out well. The butter was just sticking to the whisks and it was just having a hard time. It does say to use a stand mixer, but I don't have one because I don't do a ton of baking. But if you do have a stand mixer, I highly recommend using it because it would just save your arm power. And yeah, the paddle attachment it says to use, I feel like would just work a lot better with this butter. But I had to work with what I have, and I just had to make sure I cut the butter into smaller chunks, and I had to kind of clean out the whisks a couple of times. So it was kind of going everywhere. So I used a tea towel on top just to kind of keep everything in the bowl. But as you can see, the bowl was like sliding around. I was just having I was in struggle city with this, honestly. Yeah, a stand mixer would just have made this process so much easier, but it is what it is. So yeah, this took a little while and it was very messy, but in the end it still turned out fine. So now I'm adding in the eggs. I think there was like 4 whole eggs and then like 2 egg yolks. So you put one in and then you mix it and then you add the next one. I can't share the whole recipe on here for like copyright reasons, so I will have the recipe book linked in my description. I'd also never separated an egg yolk before, and I just kind of like remembered watching people do it on like YouTube and TikTok, so I ended up doing it like pretty well for my first time. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with that. So now I'm adding in the vanilla extract. I think this is actually vanilla essence, but I'm pretty sure it's just the same thing. And yeah, I had to do like 4 little teaspoons of this and then mix it through. And then I'm adding in half of the dry ingredients. This was also when I realized that I didn't put enough flour in. So after I do this, you'll see me pour this mixture into the rest of the half. Hopefully that makes sense, because I realized the white bowl that I was using was not big enough. So instead of pouring the other half in, I just transferred it all to that bowl. You'll see what I mean in a minute, but yeah, luckily at this moment I realized about the flour, so I just sifted it into the other bowl and it was all good. So now I'm adding the sour cream. I started by scooping it out and putting it in a cup measurement, but it ended up being like the whole thing of sour cream anyway. So if you are doing this, maybe check if it works out to be the same, because it would have just been so much easier to just pour the whole thing of sour cream in. So as you can see now, to add the extra half, I just poured it all into the bowl. I don't know if this made a difference. It kind of made it a little bit harder to mix because all the powder was on the bottom and I had to really get in there. But as I said, the white bowl just was like nearly overflowing, so I had to move it to the silver bowl. So now I have to divide the batter up into 3 separate bowls, so then we can add the food coloring to it. I just eyeballed this, I didn't measure it. I feel like one of them probably got a little bit more than the other, which you'll see later on, but it still worked out fine. It doesn't really matter too much. And also this is a super thick batter, so this is why my arms were killing so much. Mixing this thick batter was hell, honestly. But it did make it easy to scoop into the bowls, which was nice. So then I'm adding the food coloring. You need yellow, like a dark pink, and a teal. It says to use food coloring gel, but they didn't have yellow in the gel, so I just used this yellow food coloring. It kind of added quite a lot in there, but I felt like because this batter was so thick, you needed quite a lot of the colouring. And then they didn't have dark pink, they only had hot pink, but I feel like it kind of looked the same as the reference picture in the end anyway, so I don't think it really matters too much. And then the teal was like pretty spot on as well. So then you have to mix it in. It said to use one of these rubber spatulas, which I did for the pink. But it was just so hard with how thick this batter was. It just wasn't really spreading the food colouring around. So you'll see in a minute that for the yellow and the teal, I used a butter knife. I felt like that was kind of easy to just stir it around and like cut through the batter. So I definitely recommend using like a knife or something rather than the spatula. It was so much easier. So now I've got my cake tins and I'm just putting in the batter. I started with the yellow and then I moved on to a separate colour. You basically just got to plop the batter around in different areas. We are making like a marble cake, I think it's called. So you basically just want to get all the batter in and just put the colours in separate areas and then mix it all together at the end. I also tried to make this pretty even, but also the cake tins weren't the exact size. The cake tins in the recipe, it says 9-inch, but I think mine are 23 centimeters, so I don't know if that's exactly 9-inch. I feel like we don't really use inches in Australia. So I think there was a little bit, maybe like a centimeter difference. So the cake tins didn't end up as full as I would have liked, but when they're in the oven, they did spread out and also rise quite a little bit, so it worked out in the end. So yeah, as you can see, it didn't really touch like the edges of the cake tin, but now we're spreading just the tops of them just to give it that marble effect, and I also kind of like spread it out a little bit so it was a bit more even. But you don't want to spread it so much that it just becomes like a muddy, kind of mixed up color, if that makes sense. You just want to lightly smooth the tops and it'll just give it that marbled effect. So now I'm putting them in the oven. I did 2 of them to start with because our oven is quite small, and then I did the silicone pan at the very end, which did take a lot longer, but it was fine. It's the problem of having a small oven. So now onto the chocolate icing. Again, I'm doing my butter. It had really come to room temperature now, so it was a lot easier to work with. Again, we don't really use butter in terms of like stick or cup measurement as the recipe stated. So again, I just converted it to grams. So I'm mixing that up again, and yeah, it was a long, ruthless process. The butter was just like sticking to everything and I had to keep cleaning out the whisk. So yeah, it did take a little while and it was a little bit frustrating, but you just want the butter to be light and fluffy. So now I'm sifting in some icing sugar. I think Americans call this powdered sugar, and yeah, by this point I was already sick of sifting things, so yeah, I tried to do my best. I also found that using a spoon to kind of like push it through the whisk, the sieve, kind of made the process a little bit easier and kind of saved my wrist for a little while. So that's a nice little tip if you want to use that. Oh, good lord. So now I'm sifting in the cocoa powder. I think it's like Dutch processed cocoa powder or something, which was kind of expensive, but it ended up tasting really nice. I don't know if it makes a difference, it being Dutch processed, but it did taste pretty good in the end. Whoa! Now I'm adding in some milk. And again, adding in some vanilla essence. There's a lot of vanilla in this recipe. And then adding some salt again. I just guessed the amount. And then back to whisking. So then the recipe said to add some into a piping bag to reserve for decorating the cake later. I saw this hack on like YouTube or TikTok or something where you put it over a glass. And honestly, this made it so much easier. I think it said use a cup or half a cup or something, And so I just measured that out. I didn't really need to though. I feel like you could just guess. But I did measure it and then I just added it into the piping bag. So the cakes are out of the oven and I let them cool fully. And this is how they look. I think they look amazing. I did end up flipping the bottom one because I was going to try and like cut off the dome at the top. And then I also started cutting off the excess because it was kind of like rounded because it didn't fill out the cake tin as much. Also, I was eating the excess. I ate so much cake and icing while I was making this. I started feeling sick by the end. So I did end up having a plate and just put like the cake excess onto the plate. But yeah, I did start kind of carving it, but I gave up and started icing and then went back to carving later. So now I'm going in with the chocolate icing. It did say to do a medium to thick layer, but I was a little bit worried I was going to run out of icing when I needed to do the full crumb coat. So I could have done this a lot thicker than I did, and yeah, I mean, you could still see the layer definition in the end, but I just wish I had have done this a lot thicker. This is also my first time like properly icing a cake, so I have no idea if I'm using the right tools or if I'm doing this properly. I just kind of guessed, and I feel like I was sort of treating it like I was painting something, which I don't know if that helped or kind of made it a bit more difficult, but yeah, if this is wrong, don't judge me. This is my first time icing a cake. So now I'm adding the second cake on top, and it looks amazing already. I'm obsessed. And then I'm icing that as well, just like I did with the first one. And then lastly, I'm adding the last cake, but I did it like bottom side down, or top side down, you know what I mean? It kind of made the top one just super flat, which I wanted. And it's just so colorful and pretty. I love it. And then I just iced that, and then it was time to do the crumb coat. So then before I did the sides, I decided to kind of carve it a little bit to make it a little bit more even. I feel like the sides had a lot of gaps in between them, so I carved it the best I could. So then I kept icing the top and then going on to the sides. It still wasn't super even. I didn't want to carve it too much because I didn't want to make the cake any smaller. So I kind of just like shoved icing in the gaps to try and fill it in and make it a lot more even. I wanted to really take my time on this crumb coat so that the decorative icing later on would be really smooth and even, and it was just going to make my life a whole lot easier if I did this properly now. It's kind of like a primer for a cake, I guess, so you just want to make this as nice as possible. So now the cake's in the fridge for the crumb coat to harden and set. So now we're making the decorative colored icing again, adding butter. I ended up running out of butter, but luckily we had a leftover stick from other cooking that I could use, so that was pretty lucky. And then again, adding that in and whisking it, which we already know by now is a huge pain in the butt, but I just made it nice and light and fluffy. Then we added in some more icing sugar, or powdered sugar if you're American. By this point, I literally didn't want to sift anymore. I don't know if they sell like an electric sifter or something, an electric sieve. That needs to be an invention, because honestly, this was driving me nuts. My arms were so sore. I recommend putting on like a TV show or something to make the time go faster, or maybe I'm just like super slow. And I was trying to like sift it to the beat of the music I was listening to, but oh my god, my arms were so sore.
3 hours later.
So then we're adding in some more milk and then some more vanilla extract. And then once again, guessing how much salt to put in. So then mixing that all together. So then it said to divide it into 3 separate bowls like we did with the batter, because again, we need the 3 colored icing. So again, I just guessed this. So again, we're putting the food coloring in. I started with yellow, then you need the pink and the teal. And then mixing it all together, which honestly was super satisfying. And then I did my piping bag trick with these disposable piping bags. I didn't end up putting a nozzle or tip or whatever they're called into these piping bags. I just snipped the end off, since I just needed like a straight kind of line. I don't know the terms. But yeah, it just worked out pretty well. And now we get to finally decorate the cake. So I brought the cake out of the fridge. The icing had completely set, so it was really easy to decorate. I tried to copy the reference image as much as possible. Although I did find out that I don't think I mixed the icing well enough because there were a couple of like chunks of like, I don't know, butter or something. So yeah, I probably should have mixed this a little bit better, but the coloring did come out really nice. Again, this is my first time ever using a piping bag, so I tried to be as neat as possible, just following the pattern of the reference image, and yeah, I think it turned out pretty nice. So then I started getting a little bit confused with all of my outlines and everything because it said to leave a couple of patches of the brown. So I just went in and like filled in roughly into my shapes so that I knew which areas were going to be colored. So then I just properly filled in the shapes, and then I used this like offset spatula thing again. I don't know if this is the right tool to use, but it just kind of made sense to me. So I just like very carefully spread the icing around. Again, I was kind of treating it like paint, which I don't know if it really worked out that well. I feel like it was like kind of transparent, so I had to add a lot more icing than I thought I would need to. So I don't know if I explained it, but this cake is meant to look like Sally's dress from The Nightmare Before Christmas. So these are all the colourful patches, and then right now I'm doing the stitches. So I'm using that brown icing that we set aside before. I'm sitting down here because by this point it had been so many hours. My back was killing me, my feet were killing me, my arms were sore. I'm not cut out for this baking life. But we're doing the stitches. It was actually really fun and therapeutic to do. I am a perfectionist though, so it did take quite a while. And I ended up having so much brown icing left over, so that's why I said I really should have made the in-between layers a lot thicker, because yeah, I just ended up with so much spare icing. So then it said for the pink areas to do little swirls, which was kind of hard to do, especially on the side of the cake since you're obviously working with gravity. But I think it turned out really cute and it was still really fun to do. And then for the teal sections, you had to do lines across and then a bunch of dots. It's starting to look like her dress, which is so exciting. Guys, I'm finally finished so many hours later. I'm going to give you a final look of the cake. And then we're going to cut it as well because I want to see if I did the layers right. But this is what the outside looks like. This is what it looks like. I'm obsessed. This is the icing up close. It's a little bit patchy, but considering it's my first time icing a cake and using a piping bag, I'm pretty impressed with it. This is a 360 view of it. I'm obsessed with the patches. Oh my gosh. Okay, time to cut it. I'm gonna cut it from this side. Actually, no, I'm gonna cut it from this side. Oh, I'm so nervous. Okay, here we go. Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm obsessed. Okay, I'm gonna show you guys up close. Okay, this is what the slice looks like. I could have done the middle icing bits a little bit thicker, but you can still see it, which is really exciting. And the pattern of the cake, if we look inside, oh my god. It's so colorful. Wow, I am obsessed. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now I'm gonna quickly do a taste test. Oh my god, I don't want to destroy the slice. It's so good. It's so crumbly, but like soft. Oh my god. That's literally the best cake I was gonna say I've made. I don't have much experience with making cakes. It's so moist, and the icing and the flavor. Nothing's like overly sweet. Oh my god, it's just the perfect texture. Oh my god, I'm gonna eat so much of this week. Oh my god, all those hours, 100% worth it for eating this. I'm gonna eat this whole freaking cake. Okay, Okay guys, that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you would try this recipe. Do you have this cookbook? I'd love to hear about what you've made from it. As always, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. I've got like 3 spooky cookbooks, so there's a lot more recipes to come. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye! Yeah, your head's cut out.
Short people things. It's moist.
So rating out of 10?
20.